they got home, and he'd do whatever it took to prove he could change. I wondered if he actually meant it, or if he was just saying what I wanted to hear because he was desperate and embarrassed. I told him I'd talk to him when he got home and hung up before he could say anything else. 2 hours later, Steve texted me that he'd moved the family to a better hotel with actual rooms for everyone, and they were going to try to salvage the last few days of the trip. He sent photos of Mia and Caden finally smiling at the beach building sandcastles and playing in the waves. They looked happy and relaxed for the first time since they'd left, and I felt relieved that at least they'd have some good memories from Hawaii. My phone buzzed with a text from Janelle that was much shorter than her previous angry message. She said Steve had confessed everything to the whole family, and they were all shocked he'd lied so much about the situation. She apologized for calling me selfish and cruel without knowing the full story. The apology felt more like something she had to send, because Steve told her to, rather than something she actually meant, but I appreciated it anyway. I spent the next 4 days working normal hours for the first time in months. I left the office at 5 instead of 8 or 9, and I didn't check my email after dinner. I went to the gym and met a friend for coffee and cleaned out my closet, and did all the things I never had time for when I was working 60-hour weeks. I thought a lot about what I actually wanted from my life and my marriage. I realized I'd been so busy being the responsible one and resenting Steve's unemployment that I'd never told him how close I was to my breaking point before any of this happened. I'd let the resentment build up for months without having honest conversations about how overwhelmed and angry I felt. Steve excluding me was terrible and unforgivable in a lot of ways, but I'd also failed to communicate how serious our problems were before they exploded. We'd both made mistakes, and now we had to decide if we wanted to fix them or give up. The day Steve and the kids were supposed to come home, I cleaned the whole house and made their favorite dinner and tried to prepare myself for whatever happened next. I heard the car pull into the driveway at 6 and my stomach twisted into knots. The front door opened and Mia ran inside first. She dropped her backpack and ran straight to me crying and saying she was sorry for believing Daddy when he said I didn't want to come. I picked her up even though she was getting too big for me to carry easily and held her tight against my chest. I told her I would always want to be with her no matter what anyone said, and she didn't have anything to apologize for. Caden hugged my legs, and Steve stood in the doorway with all the luggage looking tired and scared and uncertain. The atmosphere felt awkward and tense, like we were all walking on broken glass, trying not to make things worse. I put the kids to bed early that night and came back downstairs to find Steve sitting at the kitchen table with his hands folded in front of him. He looked up when I walked in, and I could see he'd been crying. I sat down across from him and waited for him to start talking. He took a deep breath and told me he'd been struggling with depression ever since he lost his job 6 months ago. He said every morning he woke up feeling worthless because he couldn't provide for his family anymore. He explained that he'd been using credit card points he'd saved up for years, plus money his parents offered to contribute to plan the Hawaii trip, because he wanted to feel important again. He wanted to prove he could still do something big and meaningful for his family even though he wasn't working. I listened without interrupting while he talked about feeling like a failure every time I left for work, and he stayed home playing video games. He admitted the trip planning made him feel